Every afternoon, around 4, the sunlight starts leaning across the front yard. In winter, the thin layer of snow near the grass always melts last. I usually sit in my rocker, wearing the same old wool coat, just watching the mailman walk house to house across the street. My late husband's old pickup truck is still parked right beside the porch. But they're wrong. Sitting alone in this old house doesn't make me miserable. I just reached an age where I no longer want to live exactly the way other people expected me to. Martha from town always waves when she drives by, not just a normal wave. You can tell she looks at me like a woman who's probably lonely, living here by herself. And honestly, I know what the ladies from church say about me. They think when you're 80 years old, your husband is gone and your children moved off to bigger cities. The silence in the house must become unbearable. When we were young, American television always showed the same picture. A spotless kitchen, a husband coming home from work, a woman serving hot dinner, kids smiling around the table. Those commercials from the 60s made it seem like this was the only version of a successful life. Back then, nobody really asked women what kind of life they personally wanted. People simply assumed marriage, children, and a suburban house were the path everyone should follow. I believed it too. I kept the house neat, the refrigerator full, even straightened the folds in the living room curtains before guests came over. I thought that's what a good wife was supposed to do. But as I got older, I slowly realized something. If you spend your whole life taking care of everybody else, one day you may wake up and realize you no longer remember what you yourself enjoy. I'm not saying this with bitterness. I just think many women my age only begin asking themselves very late in life, if we had another chance, would we choose to live a little differently? People often assume that when an elderly woman chooses to live alone, she must have been deeply hurt. But honestly, sometimes a person is simply tired. I was married for 45 years. Life back then followed a routine. Wake up at 5 in the morning, bake bread, wash clothes, get the children ready for school. During winter, the basement was freezing cold, and I'd spend hours beside that old washing machine. My husband wasn't a bad man. He was just an ordinary American man from his generation. He came home from work, kicked his boots off by the door, turned on the evening news, and I automatically went to warm up coffee. For years, none of that seemed unusual to me. Then 5 years ago, he passed away. The children moved off to Seattle, Denver, Chicago. Suddenly, the house became quiet. One snowy afternoon, I was baking an apple pie by myself in the kitchen. Halfway through, I realized I couldn't remember whether I even liked extra cinnamon or not. That moment made me unexpectedly sad, because I realized I had spent so many years learning everyone else's preferences that I barely knew my own anymore. Over time, I noticed something. People aren't always comfortable seeing an elderly woman living peacefully on her own. Not because they're cruel. It's just that many people were raised to believe life only feels complete when it's built around marriage, family, and constant companionship. So when they see me mowing my own lawn, driving myself to the grocery store, or shoveling snow off the driveway during winter, something about it feels unusual to them. Last winter, our town got hit with a heavy snowstorm. I was outside wrapped in a scarf clearing the walkway when my neighbor came over asking if I needed help. I told him I was all right, and he looked genuinely surprised. Later, I realized it wasn't that people thought I was incapable. They just rarely see an 80-year-old woman quietly continuing her life on her own terms. Truthfully, living alone isn't nearly as tragic as people imagine. Most days, it's simply quieter. Sometimes the uncomfortable part isn't other people's pity. It's the complicated expression I see on certain old friends' faces when they look at me. Many of them haven't had easy marriages. Years of arguments, compromise, silence, all of it mixed together. Back when we were younger, people simply believed marriage was something you endured. But age has a strange way of making things clearer. One afternoon, an old neighbor sat in my kitchen drinking tea and suddenly said, "Sometimes I envy you." The moment the words left her mouth, she looked shocked herself, because women from our generation were never taught that an elderly woman living alone could have a life worth envying. I didn't try to convince her of anything. Everyone lives differently. I just think that if a person reaches old age and can finally sit peacefully with themselves, maybe that's not such a terrible thing. Whenever my granddaughter visits from Seattle, she tells me I should get out more. She says the community center hosts holiday parties now, even special Christmas events for seniors. Sometimes she jokes that I should start dating again. I always laugh, not because I dislike people. It's just that when you grow older, you begin understanding your energy has limits. When I was younger, I was terrified of disappointing others. If someone called asking for help, I'd rush over immediately. If someone was upset with me, I'd think about it for days. But eventually I realized that when you keep making room for everyone else in your life, sometimes there's barely any room left for yourself. Now I prefer locking the door early on winter evenings, boiling water for tea, and sitting quietly in the kitchen, listening to the wind against the windows. It's not an exciting life, but it feels peaceful. At my age, I've started believing the hardest thing people face isn't loneliness. It's realizing many years later that they never truly lived for themselves. I've experienced that kind of marriage too. Two people sitting on the same couch with the television on, neither saying a word. From the outside, the family looks complete. Inside the house, real conversation disappeared years ago. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and instinctively reach toward the other side of the bed. Then I remember he's been gone for many years now. So no, I'm not completely free from loneliness. I just don't fear it anymore. Life now is simple. I take care of the flowers in the yard, buy fresh bread in town when the weather's nice, call my children once in a while. Nobody is rushing me anymore. Nobody is asking me to become someone else. At this final stage of life, I've slowly come to believe that being able to live honestly and sit peacefully with yourself is already something rare. And maybe that's what I treasure most now.